What I'm doing today is answering some questions that somebody posed after they did some reading on emptiness and dependent arising. And instead of reading each question, because they all center on the same doubt and the same misunderstanding, but I can read part of the first one, which kind of encapsulates it. Well, part of it is, why are some objects of knowledge considered non-conceptual if all objects exist in dependence on being conceived and labeled by mind? And, how can sense consciousnesses, which are direct perceivers, perceive things if they all just exist by being merely designated by mind? And how does the mind designate itself? And it's hard for me not to draw the conclusion that mind literally creates objects if objects come into existence only after a mind has conceived and designated them. And then what is the view of the Prasangika on non-dual consciousness? Okay, so this is the misunderstanding here is what it means to be, to exist by being merely designated by mind, okay? The merely negates the object being inherently existent, okay? So it means that things become what they are and how they function in the world based on our conception and designation of them. It doesn't mean the mind goes, there's a microphone, I created it, okay, or there's another person, I created them, okay? That's not the meaning of things exist by being designated by mind. And it doesn't mean that I can look at those flowers, look at what is over there and call them grasshoppers, and that they become grasshoppers instead of artificial flowers. That's not the meaning of things exist by being merely designated by mind, okay? So the mind doesn't go abracadabra, boom, and produce things, yeah? What it means is that things can, as His Holiness puts it, they can either exist with their own objective nature, or they can exist as merely designated. He says there's two options. So that's something for us to ponder, like why there's only two options. But, you can see either things depend on the mind or they don't depend on the mind, okay? But if we can disprove that things have their own objective nature, because if they had that objective nature, we should be able to find it. But when we search for what the cup is, we can't find it, either in the parts, in the collection of the parts, or separate from the parts, okay? So you put the parts together, then the mind looks and says, oh, in conjunction with other people's minds, let's call this a cup, and it means that we can use it to hold things, specifically drinks, okay? So when we talk about things being designated by mind, we all want to know whose mind designates them. There's no talk about that. They never discuss that. It just seems to be that by common convention, things are designated, okay? And in that way, you can see how our mind gives things a meaning, and in order to convey the meaning we have given and the function we have attributed, we use one name rather than saying that round thing with the sides and a cup and a handle, please bring it. That's kind of long, And anyway, sides and cup and handle, those things are also merely designated. So then you would have to say, well, that thing with somewhat shape here, oval shape here that you use to put your hand in, and it also has something to keep stuff from falling out the bottom, and it has the side, and it has something you put on top. Yeah, please bring that, or please put some water in. I mean, it's just, yeah. So it doesn't mean that the mind creates the object by going poof. It means that to exist, the object depends on the mind. Okay, and it doesn't specify whose mind. That doesn't mean that the objects are conceptions. Yeah, the word conception sometimes usually refers to thought. Okay, so thought is a consciousness. You're not drinking out of a consciousness. Okay, and when we say it exists by term and concept, you're not holding a term. You're not holding a concept. Yeah, even if you define a concept as a conceptual appearance or as the mind perceiving that, it doesn't mean that's what you're drinking out of. Okay, it just means that to exist, the object depends on that. Okay, so the word depend means depend. It doesn't mean is. Okay, so it exists by being merely imputed or designated, dependent on the basis of designation. That doesn't mean it is the basis of designation. It's not. Okay, and it's not the mind designating it. It's not the term. It's just talking about how something exists. Okay, our mind keeps on wanting to find exactly the definitive thing that object is. Okay, is it the name? Is it the mind? Is it a conceptual appearance? What is it? I want something to grab onto, and there isn't. Yeah. As far as the meaning of non-dual, yes, the question was, if Prasangikas believe that non-dual consciousness is more correct than the dualistic consciousnesses of ordinary beings' experience. How couldn't they then agree with the Chittamadrans that the perceived object and the perceiving mind have to come from the same source? In other words, the seed on the mind basis of all. Okay, so there are many, many meanings to the word non-dual. Okay, many meanings. So the Chittamadra has their own meaning. Okay, it means that the object and the consciousness arise from the same substantial cause, which is the seed on the mind stream. In Prasangika, non-dual sometimes mean that the subject and object of a perception are not experienced as separate. Okay, sometimes non-dual means there's no appearance of conventional objects. Sometimes it means there's no appearance of inherent objects. Sometimes it means there's no grasping at inherent existence. Jeffrey adds that non-dual can mean there's no difference. So non-dual doesn't just have one meaning. Yeah. Again, it's like you got to see what the context is, and what they're saying. So Prasangikas say that the non-dual consciousness that is a direct perception, direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness is a much more accurate consciousness than our daily life consciousnesses, because that consciousness sees things as they are, sees things as empty. That doesn't mean that we don't need our conventional consciousnesses, and that since non-dual consciousnesses are superior and know reality, that we should just be in a state of realizing emptiness all day, because you're never going to eat lunch if you're realizing emptiness directly in meditative equipoise. Okay? You're just going to be in meditative equipoise. And if you want to go buy carrots, you don't use the wisdom realizing emptiness to buy carrots or to get your driver's license, okay, or to write a resume. You use your conventional consciousnesses to do those things, even though those consciousnesses are mistaken. But mistaken doesn't mean erroneous in this context. Mistaken simply means that they appear inherently existent, although they are not, okay? But something can appear inherently existent, and we can still correctly identify it according to our societal conventions, okay? If everything we saw were totally erroneous, then we couldn't function in the world because we would be, cooking dinner in the toilet and doing all sorts of absurd things because we couldn't tell a toilet from a pot, Yeah, so, okay, so, conventional things function. Yeah. If you think the toilet is a pot, that is an erroneous consciousness, okay? But just seeing the pot as inherently existent, that isn't erroneous, it is mistaken because the pot appears truly existent, although it doesn't exist that way, okay? Yeah, so we still have to rely on our conventional consciousnesses, even though they're mistaken, says the Prasangika. Nobody else. Well, the Chittamansaras agree they're mistaken, but in a different way than the Prasangikas say. But the other schools say, no, our sense consciousnesses are fine. So people have different views on this kind of thing, yeah. But if you say that all of our consciousnesses are erroneous, then we're all crazy, I mean, really crazy, yeah. Okay, but if we're seeing things as mistaken, yeah, you can still tell the difference between a person and a scarecrow. Okay, you can still tell the difference, well, between an artificial flower and a real one. Okay, even though both of them appear mistakenly to our sense consciousnesses. Okay, good. Now figure out what all that meant. Because I'm still trying to figure it out too. I can tell you the words, but what it really means in terms of how I hang on to things, we always want to make everything really solid. And it just isn't. Yeah. But saying it isn't solid doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The solid things, the inherently existent objects, do not exist. The merely designated objects do exist. So when you negate inherent existence, yeah, you are not destroying the conventionally existent object. What you're seeing is that the inherently existent object that you thought was there, that one doesn't exist. Okay.